Welcome to Filmi Ladies. Today is a special episode celebrating Galentine's Day.
Yay!
Technically February 13th, according to Parks and Rec, but we will be celebrating on February 14th because that was when our podcast would release anyway. And we are going to be looking at women's friendships in Indian cinema. Mine are all Hindi cinema. I don't know about yours.
Same.
And hopefully other people will be able to suggest some titles from other languages. We're just going to kind of go back and forth and talk about some of what we thought about and what we've seen. I'm sure there'll be a lot of overlap in our lists because I couldn't find a whole lot. How about you?
There aren't a ton.
Why do you think that is?
I have one word for you, Beth, and that word is misogyny.
Hello, old friend, misogyny.
Hello, old friend, misogyny. If I had a penny for every person who has, not so much people from our generation, but if I had a penny for all the people who say things like, girls can't be friends, or two pretty girls can be friends, or two nerdy girls can be friends, or girls and whatever boys can be, like all the idiotic rules that people come up with, it is so batshit and stupid. And even like so many of the quotes that you hear from all of these actresses, like Bebo, who is right behind you, is guilty of having said in many interviews that she doesn't think that two actresses can be friends and they can pretty much only be rivals. So I think it's so sad. Like there's so many Indian movies, or at least Hindi movies, that have bromances. In fact, RRR, which has basically been lighting the box office on fire, and that's like a contender for the Oscars, is a bromance essentially. But there really aren't that many for women. And I think the Kapoor sisters deserve credit for coming up with two films, Aisha and Veere, the Wedding, that actually do celebrate female friendships.
Yeah. I suspect it also has to do with if women are getting some of their emotional needs met with each other, then you don't need a hero for as much, and we can't have that. So
yes,
it is disappointing, and I hope this will change. And like my list is all movies from the late 2000s and 2010s, with one exception that I could find and think of, but it just does not seem to have been of interest to people to make. So
let's talk about Veere, the Wedding, because you literally look like you're part of their sleepover. You're wearing flannel like Bebo. Exactly. You're in with them. So why was Veere, the Wedding the first movie that you and I both thought of?
I mean, I think it's partly because it has 4 women. It doesn't just have 2, it has 4, and it looks at some of the, the pairings within that bigger group, but also them as a group of 4. Is that due to Sex in the City? Probably. There are a lot of shows or a lot of media about 4 women being friends, even Little Women, right, is 4 women. So this is a number that seems to have popped up. The Golden Girls, of course, another classic. And so I'm sure that's part of it, but I do really like that number allows for some different combinations within the group, so you can get to know them all a little bit. On this rewatch, I did feel like, I don't remember anyone's name, this character got the short shrift, the one who's married to the white American. I feel like she doesn't really get as much screen time as the others. Is she also the least known of the stars? Maybe, right. I don't know. But, and I'm not saying her name because I can't remember what it is. I know she's Talsania, but what is her first name? I'm blanking. I apologize, because she's great in this movie.
Right.
But this movie it's high budget. It's got big names. It was fun. It made a big splash for various reasons. But yeah, it was the one that really came to mind first and foremost, especially because there's family stuff in this movie. Like everybody is dealing with family, but they are also dealing with each other, and that they kind of, they're happy to reunite, and then there's a problem, right? But then they work to get it solved. It does get solved instantly, quickly, right. Which is a little, or too easily, I should say. But I do at least like that the friendship actually has some meat to it, and it's not just they're friends, here's their plot. It's like, right, they are friends, that is part of the plot.
Right. Yeah, and I like some of the conversations that they have when they think that whatever, like you're being pig-headed or whatever. It felt very genuine and it felt very authentic to me. I like that it was basically them calling each other out instead of being like, oh, there's these external circumstances due to which we're mad at each other, which would have been a cop out, because that's what happens in real friendships too, where it's like you think someone's being annoying or stubborn or pig-headed or whatever, and then you have to like work through it. So it helps that in this movie everyone has such great chemistry. I mean, you can tell that Sonam Kapoor and Kareena Kapoor have a lot of like affection for each other, and that just sort of like comes through. It was definitely a fun movie. I wouldn't say it's like one of my favoriteest movies of all time or anything like that, but it's like a fun celebration of female friendship. I actually prefer Aisha to this one. Like I've seen Aisha many, many times. And I think I mostly watch Aisha because I just find Lila Dubey, not Lila Dubey. I just find her so hilarious in that, and I find Sonam Kapoor hilarious in that too. And I mean, it's based on Emma. What's not to like? For those of you who haven't seen one of our previous episodes, we did an episode on Jane Austen adaptations in Indian cinema, and Amrita was one of our guests, and we spoke about Aisha in that episode. Also, you should see it. Did you like Aisha more than Veere the Wedding, Beth?
Seen Aisha once, I think, and I actually just re-listened to our Jane Austen episode the other day, and I can't even remember what I said for how many times I've seen it. It doesn't really stand out to me.
Okay.
But it was also I have not revisited it since learning to appreciate Sonam a little bit, because I only really like her in Khoobsurat and this movie. So I may have been fairly dismissive at the time and haven't revisited it. But this did not hold up for me as well as I hoped it would. I don't dislike it, but I remembered it. I thought it kind of had more going on than I feel like it did upon this rewatch, which is not to say there's nothing going on, but I was just caught up in because it made such a kerfuffle, right? And
yeah,
people had all these think pieces and whatever. So maybe now that we're a few years away from that, but if you haven't seen it, like, it's a delightful film. These women all turn in great performances. Shika is her name, right?
Yeah.
She deserves her name being said. I think they all make different characters out of what they have. There's arcs for each of them. If I had to pick a weak point, I would say it was Sonam, but I don't think it's in a horrendous way or whatever. So I think it's just a great fun film about a topic that we don't really see. Aisha, I mean, certainly the story bone should be strong, given that it's Jane Austen, and as we've discussed, like, the adaptation into Indian, especially very rich Indian culture, seems to work really well. But yeah, I should revisit it.
Okay. I think one of the other movies that I like, that sort of showcases women friendships and has a lot more substance and meat to it, is actually the movie Lajja. Have you seen that one?
I have not, and I was interested to hear you mention that, because I think that I have maybe I'm even thinking of the wrong film, but I feel like I would not have said, oh yeah, about that based on what I think I know about it. So tell me.
So Lajja is interesting. It's one of those movies where it's like really masala and really massy, and there's parts of it that are very annoying, and it's like kind of patchily directed, but all the performances are really good. And it's one of those films that I feel like could have been even better. But it's a good one-time watch, and it has great performances. So it has Rekha, Madhuri, Manisha, Mahima Chaudhary. I think they are the four main people in it. And it's sort of like the story of like these four different women, and they don't necessarily intersect with each other all the time, but it's like each woman has like a situation that she's like dealing with. And there's a really amazing friendship between Madhuri and Manisha's character in the movie. So Madhuri basically plays like sort of like a bar dancer person, and Manisha is this like housewife who is from like a really bad marriage, and she hasn't been treated well and things like that, and she's sort of upper class and educated, and Madhuri is kind of like crass, and they just sort of like, they meet each other and they're sort of like these opposites, and Madhuri's a spitfire, and she's basically teaching Manisha to sort of stand up for herself and not let people like browbeat her into submission. And their chemistry is really, really good. They just really light up the screen together. And they have that song. I'm sure you've heard the song or seen the song Badi Mushkil. Gore Gore Galo Pe Kala Kala Til. It's such a good song, and they do that together. So I really like their track in that film, and it's very important because later on something really bad happens to Madhuri, and they sort of like turn the tables, because until then their friendship is based on essentially Madhuri kind of like taking Manisha under her wing and telling her to like stand up for herself and not be so timid all the time, and just like be bold and all of these things. But then Madhuri is the one that gets into real big trouble. And it's Manisha who sticks up for her and essentially like takes care of her. So it's interesting because they're friends brought together by weird circumstances, but then there's also like this element of like sisterhood to it. And then there's even some sort of like mothering happening. Like there's literally a scene where Madhuri is like crying, and there's been like this mob that's out to get her, and she's crying, and Manisha like puts Madhuri's head on her lap, and she's literally like taking care of her and wiping her tears, and she's telling all the people to back off. So it's very moving, it's very like substantial, and I loved seeing Madhuri and Manisha, like two powerhouse actresses together, and they play really well off of each other. So even though the movie itself is not necessarily about friendship, and it's kind of like a hard-hitting film, when I think of like two women characters sort of depicting friendship on screen, Lajja is definitely one of the ones I think of. It's worth a watch just for at least their interactions. What else? What other movie do you like?
Well, we go to my oldest one. And this, I just happened to watch this the other day by not accident, but because of something else that I'm working on. And we're actually going to do a whole podcast about this film, so I won't say too much about it. But the 1973 Yash Chopra film Daag has at the end a really interesting friendship that comes out of the two main women in the film. Have you finished your rewatch of Daag, Pitu?
I did. I saw it yesterday.
So I don't know if we should say how this film ends or not.
No, let's not.
Okay, because it's a trip. But we'll just say that Sharmila and Rocky are the two main women in this film, and they are connected by a different relationship that both of them have. And I think in the end, because it's so unconventional, I think that we have to kind of attribute this to something like a friendship, because it's not exactly, it is a family sort of, but so
it's really a friendship.
Yeah, I feel like it's a friendship, and it starts out with a friendship because Rocky sees that Sharmila has been mistreated by her place of employment, and she offers her a job and a home and a sort of makeshift family. So I think it really is a friendship. And is it based initially on pity? Yeah, it is, but it's someone with privilege trying to help someone without in a very direct way that works better in films than it would in real life. And I was really not this film goes off into a very different direction by the end, which we won't spoil, but it is fascinating. And I just thought, I didn't see that coming, that their relationship would kind of shape the way that it did, and that they have some conversations that are hard and honest. And I really like that. And it takes what you were saying earlier about women, certain kinds of women can't be friends because they're competing. It takes people who are competing and lets them get to know each other a little bit as human individuals. And I think that's really lovely. It's not probably the main point of the film, although maybe it is, I don't know, but we'll get into that. So stay tuned for, probably will be in early March. It's fascinating.
But that's just what you were just saying. It just reminded me of, I'm sure you've seen Zubeidaa, right? That had Karishma Kapoor and Rekha and Manoj Bajpayee.
A long time ago, but yeah, I have seen that.
See, Zubeidaa, I couldn't care less about Manoj Bajpayee in that movie. My entire attention was on Karishma Kapoor and Rekha's relationship in it. And that is actually similar, because you have Rekha being kind of like the buddy Malkin, like the older wife, and then Zubeidaa is like this young upstart who was an actress, and she's now the wife of this prince royal person. And that also has that element where it's kind of like Rekha could have been a complete monster to her and been like excuse you, like I'm the queen. But she's actually really nice to her, and she sort of like takes her under a wing and helps her figure out like royal protocol and stuff like that. Like she's really nice. And instead of being this person who's going to compete with this young, pretty girl and be like, you're trying to take my place, she's actually like making a space for her in their life and in their structure, and kind of being like, we can coexist and we can actually take care of each other, and we can sort of be a unit against anyone else who is trying to like put us down, which is such a smart and sensible thing to do. Like instead of infighting and competing with each other, you could just like join forces, I guess.
Yeah.
But
you're making me think of a Bulbul, which of course does not take that angle, but yes, they're related. Obviously, they're sisters-in-law, I guess.
Sisters-in-law.
Yeah. And there are a lot of movies that have sisters-in-law or sisters or mother-in-law, whatever that. So we're very specifically not really talking about that. But if we were to expand the definition of female relationships that are not by blood, I think that's where you're going to find a lot more options, obviously.
Yeah, Bulbul had that going too. You're right. That was really nice. And then I was also thinking of like Chokher Bali, because now Chokher Bali has that whole thing of like between Rema Sen and Aishwarya Rai's character of like the competition, and one person has privilege and the other one doesn't. And their friendship seems very fragile. It's very like, it's kind of like you're almost like, no, let's not do this. This looks very alarming to me. I don't know how this is gonna go. But that's kind of the charm of Chokher Bali, is that you don't really know where it's gonna go. I mean, it's such a great title, right? It literally means a particle in the eye, like a sand particle, which is so true. It's like this constant like bone of contention that's bothering people. But that one was interesting. And then I have I'm looking at my list here. So I don't think you've seen Pink, right?
I have not, because it just sounded too stressful for me, but I certainly remember it being important and getting some interesting conversations going, and obviously great performances.
Yes. So I liked Pink as well. So Pink is really interesting. So again, you have these like friends. You have Tapsi Pannu, and then Kirti Kulhari, and then this other friend that they have, like these three friends, and the entire movie is basically a courtroom drama, and Amitabh Bachchan is kind of their attorney, and he helps them take on these guys who have tried to like molest Tapsi Pannu's character. And it's a courtroom drama, but the friendships between them are so good. Like again, what I like about movies like Pink is that when they depict female friendships, it's not all milk and honey and sweetness and niceness all the time. There's hard conversations, there's anger. Like there's scenes in Pink where basically Kirti Kolari is getting mad at Tapsi Pannu because she's like, we should just try to keep this quiet. Like, why are you constantly talking about this incident that happened? We're just going to get into trouble. We can't afford to, get into trouble. And Tapsi Pannu is kind of like, fine, I'll shut up. But, how long can I shut up? I mean, at some point, the trouble's going to come to our door. So there's all this like conflict that happens. There's one point at which one of the girls slaps the other because she's so frustrated, because she's like, you're literally endangering all of us by this thing that you said about us. And so it's interesting. It's like they're laughing, they're crying, they're trying to figure out even like their unity against the judicial system, or against the men who have perpetrated this crime against them. And there's just so much complexity to it. And the other interesting thing about Pink is that family is completely relegated to the background, because these are working women who are renting an apartment together, like they're tenants. And Tapsi Pannu's parents live in Delhi, but she doesn't live with them because as a dancer, she comes home at odd hours and they stay up for her and blah, blah. And then Kirti Kulhari is not from Delhi. And so they're living together, but when they are going in and out of the courthouse and one of them has been jailed and they're in like serious trouble, it's basically these three girls who are taking on everything instead of having their family bailing them out. So I thought that was very interesting too, because sometimes I think for so many of us, our friends are more important than family is. And I think especially nowadays, for me, for so many of for my friends as well. It's like the first person we think of when we're in trouble is our friends. It's not necessarily our family. And I have so many gay friends, specifically in India, for whom it seems like their parents get this very fake version of who they are, and their friends really get to see who the real person is, because they can't, if they haven't come out to their parents, they can't talk about really anything important that's going on in their life, but they can talk about it with their friends. So when you just break up and you're going through a heartbreak, you're not going to tell your parents about it because they don't even know that you're gay, but you can tell your friends about it, and your friends will be there to like buy you like pizza and beer and wipe your tears and tell you your ex was an asshole anyway. So, it's their loss, not yours. So I think like as time passes, I think friendships to such a large extent are sort of eclipsing family for so many of us, where we feel like we can be the more authentic person with our friends rather than the sanitized version that we put forward to our family. And that's why I think movies that depict all of those emotions, where it's like, yes, you can fight with your friends, you can scream at them and yell at them, you can rebel against them, you can tell them they're wrong. I think that's so much more interesting than just these sort of friendships that are portrayed where it's like, let's go have brunch. Like, yeah, we can have brunch, but it's also, let's also talk about deeper stuff or get mad at each other, or, like just being more authentic, I think.
Yeah. Something you said makes me think of a question that I'd love to know what you think about. Do you feel that depicting, or at least centering, or more importantly, centering women's friendships in Hindi cinema is a certain kind of, brings a certain modernness, or results from a willingness to deal with modernness and or modern urbanness? Like, I know there's all these different layers and circles for why things, will fly or not with audiences. But what you were saying about like working women being away from home, but certainly being sort of mentally away from home, even if they do live in the same city or whatever, but like not living under their parents' roofs, because that is a fairly recent phenomenon in large numbers, right? And I have no idea what those numbers are. I'm making some wild assumptions here. So, and if you do know, please correct me. But it just seems like this couldn't have really been a thing in the same way until the 2010s or so. I don't know, but that's something to think about, I think.
I think so, because I mean, in the past, for instance, women's lives almost entirely revolved around their family, right? Like their birth family and the family that they were married into, and, their extended family. I mean, that itself used to like take over people's social calendars, and you were supposed to keep everything within the family. You didn't really talk about stuff with people outside of it. But I think once people started working and, women started working, I think once women stepped out of their own home and started renting with others, or things like that, I think that's when they started talking about stuff, because that's also where you have different experiences. For instance, my aunt was a flight attendant for 35 years. And she couldn't really talk about her career with her parents. They were very supportive towards her, but there was so much harassment that she dealt with on a regular basis as part of her job, like from passengers, from pilots. This was the early days of aviation in India. There wasn't much recourse. And so she would literally reach out to senior flight attendants and ask them for help. And how do I navigate this very tricky issue? Or how do I talk with passengers who don't understand boundaries and stuff like that? It's like, even if she had talked about with her parents, I don't know if they would have understood what she was talking about. So I think when you're a working person, or when you have long hours, or you have interpersonal conflicts at work and stuff like that, there's so much you can't even talk about with the older generation. Like, are they even gonna, like, they may be supportive, but are they gonna understand what you're saying? Or like I said, if you have a different sexuality, or I mean, even in India, it's like, to this day, if you want to marry someone who's from a different religion or from a different caste, it's really hard. People keep that under wraps. I have friends that they were dating someone, and until they were 100% sure that this person was the one, they weren't even going to mention that person at home, because you're going to go through all of this drama only to break up. It's not worth it. But their friends knew.
Yeah.
So I think also the age of the filmmaker makes a big difference. I mean, I think back in the day when you had all of the baby boomers that were making films, friendships didn't matter in those movies at all. But I think one filmmaker that I really, well, two filmmakers that I really associate with depicting friendships is the Akhtar siblings.
Sure.
Farhan Akhtar with Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara and things like that. And then Zoya Akhtar with the films that she makes. I think that they represent that like class of like modern urban working Indians, where in their films as well, it's the friends who get you and the friends who understand you and the family where you just kind of are almost like constantly fighting with them. Like even if you look at Dil Dharakne though, you have these characters that can't really communicate with their folks, but they can communicate with their friends. So I think age of filmmaker also makes a huge difference.
Something you said just made me think of a film that's not on my list. And this was my very first Hindi film, which is Mujhse Dosti Karogi, has the friendship with Rani and Karina, which lasts over the course of years. That they start with their childhood and you see them later. And obviously challenges happen and everything, but I don't think of that film as being about their friendship, but it is there. And it is a complicating factor to the romance, obviously, but it's there. So there's probably more of that kind of thing than I'm thinking of right off the top of my head. And actually I have a question I want to ask you as an ending one kind of about that. But it has to allow, filmmakers have to allow for the emotional heart to shift from family to something else, to work, to friends, to people in some other way other than being related to them.
Right. Yeah. Let me see.
Have you seen Parched?
I have not yet because I thought it was going to be too depressing for me.
It is not super uplifting. I really love Parched.
Okay.
And it does have, when a film is set in small town Rajasthan, you think, oh no, here we go.
That's what I thought. That's why I haven't seen it.
Because nobody ever seems to set anything cheerful there. And I'm sure that's not true. It's just the things I've happened to see. Maybe it's Hindi filmmakers who plonk down, things there. But that is a wonderful film. It does have these three very interesting women at the heart of it. And they are all, if I remember all of them, but at least one of them is hardcore into Shah Rukh Khan.
Really?
And you will appreciate that about them, and that he kind of serves as an interesting fantasy figure who represents certain things to them that I think you will both relate to and enjoy. And also it's beautiful because every time someone's in Rajasthan, there's amazing architecture and there's lenga with sparkles and like all that, gorgeous.
It's always pretty.
It's so
like
pretty.
Photography. It must be like a if someone is a DOP, like a director of photography, that must be like their dream job, right? Like, let's set this movie in Rajasthan. Every frame is gonna look gorgeous.
Right. We will talk to you about like girls not getting to go to school and like child marriage, but it will be very pretty. So
yes, it will be pretty.
It's okay. That was one that I kind of forgotten about that film, but it popped into mind when I was kind of Googling around for this. And that is a really great film that I would encourage people to watch if they have not.
Okay. Well, speaking of Shah Rukh Khan, how do you feel about Chak De India? Because when I think of Chak De India, I don't necessarily think of it as a movie about female friendships. I always think of it as like a sports movie. Mm-hmm. And I always think about it as a movie of like, well, it's basically a sports movie. So it's all these people with this common goal of like, winning the prize. But I find that interesting too, because sometimes friendships are not necessarily people that you sought out because you thought that they were awesome. It's more like you were flung into the situation and now you're like, I think you're okay.
As an adult too, right? Or like at least as an older teen, because I think we've all experienced it is a lot harder to make friends as an adult than it is when you're in school, generally speaking. And I love that film does let, again, some relationships develop among the different women. And yes, they are also all their relationship to their coach and their relationship as a unit, but then also you do have these specific pairings. Obviously, some of them knew each other before the film starts, right? But it is, and the way they learn to stand up for each other and things like that is, I think it's a great example of a film about women's friendship. Even though, as you said, they're not choosing each other, but they are choosing to choose each other eventually.
Right.
they don't have to be friends in order to be an effective team, but they are also wanting to be friends, I think, in some way. And it's too bad we never kind of see, the film stops where it does for very good reasons, but we don't know what happens to their relationships after that. And that's okay, because friendships ending and changing as conditions change is an important thing to get your brain around too as an adult. But I think that's a great example of. And I would assume some of the other sports movies about women may also have this. I've seen Mary Kom, but that's an individual sports person, an athlete, right? So you need the team. So maybe some of these cricket movies, like Tapsi Pannu's cricket movie, I don't know if that has good female friendships in it or not. I probably am not going to watch that, unfortunately.
I refuse to watch cricket movies. They're very annoying. I refuse to watch cricket, actually.
I do not refuse, but I certainly, there's a lot that I do not understand, because every time someone's given me a lesson on cricket, and there are many people from many different cricket playing cultures who have tried, I can't do it. My brain will not hold that information.
So my husband can become friends with any Uber driver on the basis of cricket. Anyone.
Nice.
It doesn't matter. Like the last time we were in New York, we got into the Uber, and just based on our Uber driver's accent, my husband asked him if he was possibly from the West Indies, and the answer was yes. And then the guy goes, "You know about the West Indies?" And my husband was like, "Yes, you're a cricketer." And he rattles off some names of this person. Was like, "Are you from India?" And Ajit's like, "Yes." And then he's rattling off his favorite Indian cricketers. And it was like that 40-minute journey to our friend's house was just the two of them yammering about great cricketers and singing the praises of the West Indian team and the Indian team. And it's just like, this is ridiculous. I was not part of that conversation. But there's a baseball movie that I like that has Tom Hanks as the coach, and it has Gina Davis.
Their Own.
Yes, it's really cute. Yeah. It has Madonna in it. She's hysterical. Yep. And Tom Hanks as like the drunkard coach is hilarious. He's so crass and like socially inept. It's a really cute movie, actually. And it like reminds me a little bit of Chak India in the sense of like the bickering between the girls and all of that.
Definitely.
You haven't seen Wednesday yet, right?
No, not yet. I keep meaning to.
Wednesday is amazing because Wednesday has like a really good female friendship between Wednesday Addams and then her friend Enid, and they're like complete opposites and they're adorable. It's really good. And that it's also fun because their chemistry with each other is amazing. But there's also this one big like fight that they have where they're just like yelling each other. Well, actually Enid is yelling at Wednesday, and it was very gratifying because I wanted that to happen. Like the tension was building, and I really wanted Enid to really say what she felt and not be passive aggressive. And that was a really good one too for women friendships. Have you heard of this movie that I think Zoya Akhtar is going to make? It's called Jile Zara.
No.
So she's going to make a road trip movie, and it's going to have, I believe, Katrina, Priyanka Chopra, and I think Alia Bhatt, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not excited about the cast, and I'm afraid that it's going to be a rehash of Zindagi Milegi Na Dobara. But they're making this road trip movie, apparently.
All right. I'll watch it.
So I was like, it just seems like an odd grouping to me. Like there's Priyanka, then there's Katrina, and then there's Alia. And I was just like, huh? Whereas the grouping of Hrithik, Farhan, and Abhay, I really like that. Like, Hrithik and Farhan are actual close friends in real life. And then Abhay has like a nice complementary energy. But then the combination of Katrina, Priyanka, and Alia, I don't know how I feel about that. It's just too weird to me.
Yeah, for some reason, I feel like what's going to happen if they don't listen to Zoya, which she's obviously a very good director. Like if anyone can make this work, it's probably her. I feel like it's going to be like these three people showed up and got their picture taken. It's not going to feel
right.
If they are supposed to cohere as friends, I'm not sure I think that will happen.
Yeah.
But I await being pleasantly surprised.
Okay. Apart from that, what else was I thinking of?
Well, there's a couple from about 10 years ago we have to talk about, which is Queen and Cocktail. Of course, both of which made humongous splashes when they were out. And I have never rewatched Cocktail, but I remember all sorts of interesting conversations about was it feminist or not, and what do we make of Deepika's character and all those kinds of things. And then Queen, of course, was just an absolute phenomenon that now I don't know what to do with because of Kangana. So I have rewatched it. I even bought the DVD of it at one point, but I've recommended it to friends who have who've never watched Indian cinema. I'm like, this might be a fun one for you to try. I don't know anymore if I would recommend it, but I remember loving it and being delighted by it, but I don't know what to do now.
I love Queen and I love Kangna and Lisa Hayden's friendship in it. It was really cool. Lisa Hayden is actually awesome in that movie.
She is.
She was also the only thing I liked about Ae Dil Hai Mushkil, which is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I love her in that scene where she's talking about the Vatavaran, like she's funny in that.
Yeah.
But I did not like Cocktail at all. I saw it once and I thought it was infuriating. Like the ending was so bad and I hated it. It was just like a rehash of all of those like awful 70s and 80s movies where, you know, the westernized girl is the bad one. And then, you know, it was so terrible. And I was actually very disappointed with Homi Ajania for making it because like, what the hell? I thought he made good movies and then he made Cocktail. And I was disappointed with Deepika and Saif for doing it. I don't have any opinions about Diana Penty, so couldn't really care less. But that movie was very disappointing. Like the ending was very disappointing. Did you like Cocktail?
I really don't remember, to be honest with you. I think I liked it okay. And I just remember this is going to sound ridiculous. I remember doing a lot of reading about, reading the opinions about it, but I do not remember what those opinions are. So like my brain is not working, but I was kind of thinking about trying to rewatch that before recording this and I just ran out of time, but
right.
It does seem to slot into that grand tradition of demonizing the more quote unquote modern person who drinks and smokes and things like that. I remember some very spirited defenses of her character and of alternate readings than that existing back when it came out, that I do. Yeah. By people I certainly, trust and respect. So I think that, if I do revisit the film, I would like to also revisit some of the writing about it. But yeah, I don't know if that one will have held up very well either, but at least they tried, ? Would you say that film is about the friendship or is it about the romances?
I don't actually even know what that movie is about. It's so confusing and so bad. It seems like I feel like they want it to be about the friendship, but then they also want it to be about the romance, but the film does neither of them well enough, in my opinion. Like it doesn't work. The romance part of it didn't work for me, but then neither did the friendship work for me. I didn't feel like Deepika and Diana had much friend chemistry with each other, so that didn't really work for me.
I mean, that is what a great term to bring up, because friend chemistry, I think most of us have experienced. It's incredibly real, as it's as real as romantic chemistry or whatever, and it is so precious. And those of us who are lucky have a lot of it, and those of us who are maybe unlucky do not. And it is a wonderful thing, and I wish more films from any language and tradition would capture it. Like I get frustrated with the lack of, or at least the underrepresentation of friendships in American media all the time, because romances and family are almost always prioritized over friendships, particularly once you're an adult, I think, which I think is one of the reasons why Sex and the City was such a phenomenon, right? Like it did. And granted, those women they were young, not young adults, like a teenager, but like they were, and I have no interest in watching the reboot, but I think it's great that there is a project about women in their 50s being friends and maintaining a friendship, because maintaining a friendship can be as hard as maintaining a marriage or whatever, right? So it doesn't have to be, but it can be. And I think that as a culture, we benefit from being honest about that, especially the more science tells us about the dangers of loneliness to mental and physical health. Friendships are important to humans. And as the pandemic has taught us, if we didn't already understand that, like being around people you care about matters. It matters so much.
Yeah, and I actually had read an interesting article, I think, in the Atlantic, where they had talked about like older adults who get divorced, like,
Hmm.
people in their like late 50s or 60s who get divorced. And they were talking about how women's life expectancy after divorce was like pretty decent, pretty
Mm,
on par with whether they're
mm,
married or divorced, it didn't make a difference. But
mm.
for men, after divorce, their
Oh,
life expectancy completely plummeted, and their chances of depression and mental illness actually increased a lot. And the reason that they gave for that was because it was the women during their entire married life that were the ones that were in charge of the social calendar and
yep.
making sure you were hanging out, and men did nothing. They were just like
Mm,
passive about it.
mm.
And then once the divorce happens, the women keep the friends because they're the ones who put in all the effort, and the men
Right.
don't bother,
Oh, that's
and now they're
fascinating.
lonely.
Yeah.
And I found that so interesting too. And it's weird because I've found people trying to put me into that like planning role, which I have resisted every single time. Like, it's so funny where it's like, let's say my husband has friends from work. This actually happened. Like, he had friends from work, like male friends from work. And then the guys were like, oh, we should get together with the wife sometime. And then the wife messaged me and she said, we should start like organizing. And I was like, no,
No,
that's not my job.
not doing that
I,
labor.
I'm not doing that. Like, they can figure it out. I'm not doing that. But that happens a lot where it's kind of
Mm.
like, let's us plan things. And I'm like, no, I plan things with my friends. It's
Right.
okay.
Right. I don't need my husband's work friends.
No. And they can plan their own thing if they want to.
There's another film on my list that I have watched and I really don't remember at all that maybe you do is Door.
Oh yeah, I remember that. It had Aisha,
Gulpanag.
Takia, and
Yeah.
Gulpanag.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really good too.
Do you remember enough about it to kind of speak about what kind of how the friendship works in that film?
I remember it being very cute and heartwarming at the
Mm,
time, and it had that effect where, see, not all friendships are depicted equally, right? Like,
sure.
not all friendships are where the people are like this. A lot of times it's the
Yeah.
more privileged person, like
Yeah.
in Daag, where
Yeah.
one person is sort of taking care of the other. And
Hmm.
then in Lajja, it's flipped, where
Mm,
technically Manisha is sort of like upper class and rich, and Madhuri's character is a dancer and she's not. But in this situation, she actually has the upper hand over Manisha. So in Dora, you have that classic thing where Gulpanag's character is like educated. I think she's a lawyer and she's
mm.
like from the city. And then Aisha Takia's character is like this young, pretty, timid person, and she kind of like takes care of her. So, I mean, I remember watching it at the time and finding it very heartwarming and
Mm.
sweet. It's just, I didn't feel like it had anything particularly new to say.
Okay.
So it's not the most memorable of films. It's kind of like, well, it was cute, but you know,
Hmm.
not necessarily. And see, that's the thing. Um, if I had to pick a movie that I think really sort of depicts friendship really well, I would actually pick Dil Chahta Hai.
Oh, of
That
course.
is
Yeah.
that is my number
Yeah.
one.
Oh, yeah.
But it annoys me that, I mean, it doesn't annoy me, but it's about three dudes, right? And I just wish that none of the movies that I've seen that deal with women's friendships, like Veere the Wedding or whatever, they're just not up to the same
No,
mark.
they're
And
not.
even like Zindagi Milegi Na Dobara, I don't think it's on the same level as Dil Chahta Hai
No,
for sure,
no.
but it's still decent.
Mm.
And I don't know if G Laser will be up to that mark. So
Right.
I just kind of wish that all of these like amazing friendships we've seen, like Jay and Weeru from Sholay, or even the friendships we saw in RRR, there's just they're so leagues ahead of
Yeah.
whatever the films are showing. Like, we have like one like Queen here and there, or one Aisha here and there, and you don't really have anything of that that sort of like meatiness. it's
Mm,
just it's
hmm.
just not there. I wish that Dil Chahta Hai had like sort of like a women's version of it. But then we've also seen the kind of backlash that we've spoken about in the past, where in the West, when they decided to remake Ghostbusters with women, there was this gigantic backlash
Right.
where it was like, how dare you? So it's like, you can't have that.
Have you there's a couple of others on my list that I want to maybe just mention and see if you have any thoughts about. Um I've not seen this film. I don't even know what language it's in, so it may not even fit our theme at all. Angry Indian Goddesses. Have you seen that movie?
I have
Okay.
not.
So that was
I
one
don't
when I
even know
was,
if it's a movie or a documentary.
I think it's a feature film.
Okay.
So this came up when I was looking for lists of films about women's friendships. That one came up. Here's an interesting one. The Lunchbox. Remember the Lunchbox? And
Like
like
they're fun.
the main woman, she's friends with her neighbor upstairs and they like are
Right.
passing things through the way. I'd completely forgotten about that. And again, I don't know if that's the point. That friendship is not the point of the movie, but it does add some real texture to her. And what I remember feeling about that film is that it dealt so much with loneliness and isolation in ways, and that clearly shows a connection that she has that was, part of her day, like nice texture to her day.
Okay.
And then another one that came up on some of those lists, I apologize, I do not know how to pronounce this film. It was the one set in Delhi among a community of people from Northeast India, Akoni.
Akoni. Yeah, that was on my
Akoni.
list. I like that one too.
I like that film a lot. And that was, again, a group of people that you almost never see in mainstream Indian cinema, in my experience. And it's focused on a wedding and preparing food for a wedding, but it really is about these friends trying to, be family for each other and show up for each other in a way that's really nice.
Yeah, that was a really good one too. And then obviously this movie is not about friendships, but I did like Kundabai and Vanati in Ponniyin Selvan. Basically Trisha Krishnan and Shobita Dhulipala's role. They had an entire song, by the way, that was shot, and I've seen the video. I mean, parts of the video. They had a song called Soul, which is really cute. It's shot on this boat. It's so pretty. I've seen stills from it. They cut it from the actual movie, and I was like, why would you do that? But it's very cute. It's just the two of them cavorting on this boat, looking
Oh, that
gorgeous
would
in
be
their like
fun. I would
outfits.
like that.
Yeah.
I loved
So that
that
was really
scene.
sweet too. Yeah. But I think that was it. If you, using all of our couch change, could make a movie about women friendships, what would you do? Because I have an idea.
Oh, why don't you go ahead? And if I can think of something, I will share it after you share yours. You go ahead.
So my idea is that there's a group of women from different countries and they're all paleontologists and they go on a dinosaur fossil expedition to Siberia.
Oh,
Because Siberia and Ukraine have really good like fossils.
yeah.
So they go to Siberia and then they have to like fight all kinds of things. And I wouldn't mind there being some magic in it, like some magic realism would be awesome. But yeah, so it's a group of paleontologists and they're from different countries and they go to Siberia and they do this expedition. I think it would be amazing. It would be a great adventure movie.
Wow.
Yes.
I like that. Nothing's really leaping to mind for me. This is a super personal choice in a way. I am a very lucky person when it comes to my job and my career, and I have deep and enduring friendships with many of the people I work with.
Same.
And that's not a thing I feel like you see a ton of either. And that's fair because work is not a happy place for a lot of people, or even if it's fine, you want to leave it at the end of the day, which is absolutely understandable and an acceptable mindset, in my opinion, despite us living in contemporary America. But I think there's a lot of room to do something interesting with work friendships. Because that is a thing that we in a way choose, right? Like you don't choose your family, but you choose where you spend a lot of your time, even if it's not a choice you make with a whole lot of other options, or even if it's a choice you make for reasons that don't really have to do with those people, that they're for other concerns. But kind of thinking about this, when you think about how much time of your waking days you spend at work and everything, like these people are an incredible part of your life, probably.
Yeah.
Like the friend I keep talking about going to Indian movies with, I know him from work, like, so I think that could be a really rich setting for something. And you get people from all over, right, come together in a workplace in a way that they may not for like, again, family, neighbors, church,
Right.
religious gatherings, a hobby, like whatever. I feel like work maybe has the potential to bring together the most different kind of people, which could be good. And I love these I love some of these films that put in actors we don't know as much about or haven't seen as much of, and then they have some nice meaty roles. So like I think you could do a lot with all sorts of interesting casting with a movie about friends. And I just think we need more stories about this because these social connections matter so deeply to humans.
Right.
I think it's
So Fauji, which we were talking about, that was basically a group of work friends, right?
Those are work friends. You're right. Yeah.
And that was cute. I say chaps.
You know what? Like, as much as I'm not pro-military, I would watch the bejesus out of a show like Fauji set among women in the military. Like, that would be
Yes.
fascinating. Because what a world that like I do not want to live in, but it would
Right.
be incredibly interesting to see something like that. And even if I assume that one of the key issues for actual women who experience this is what it's like to be such a minority among such, so many men in such a hyper violent, culture, but it wouldn't even have to be about that. It could be about other things.
Right.
So I don't know. I think that could be great.
Yeah.
My
Okay.
question for you before we close is, if I recall from Parks and Rec, which I have not rewatched in a while, part of Galentine's Day is having breakfast, I think, right? And at least pancakes are key to Parks and Rec and Leslie Knope's friendships, right? So if you could go out for pancakes with any woman from Hindi cinema, a character, who do you choose to celebrate Galentine's Day with pancakes with?
Wahida, always.
Which movie though?
Ooh. I think Wahida from Guide.
Ah,
Rosie from Guide, because
nice.
she's a dancer, she's gorgeous, she's a spitfire, she likes to travel, she likes to wear nice outfits. I feel like we would have so much in common.
That
She's
could be
not a
really
fan of
fun.
spelunking or going in caves, so that we
Well,
don't
it's just
have
for
in common,
breakfast,
but
so
it's
that's
fine.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just over pancakes.
She
So
would be very glamorous at breakfast, I feel like.
she would be.
I would
She
go
would
with
not
Rosie.
spill syrup on herself like some of us do.
Yeah. She wouldn't be wearing sweatshirts like me. She would just
No.
be very like poised. She might even break into dance. Like, I don't know. That would be
All for
cool.
it.
She'd probably be in her aquamarine sari and looking amazing and glamorous. What about you? Who would you pick?
I thought of this question while we were recording, so I haven't really pre-planned this, but the person who came to mind first is Rani Mukherjee's character Meenakshi from Aya, because I really relate to her. I love that character. That's an interesting women's friendship in that film too. It's not the main point, obviously, but her kind of begrudging friendship with the woman she works with is very funny. But I love Meenakshi. I love her sense of imagination. I love how filmy she is. I love that she knows what she wants and she won't be deterred. And but also she is so like kind-hearted and all about it. And her sense of being willing to go on a kind of a little bit of an adventure. I really enjoy that. She might be a bit much in real life, right? But like for breakfast, she would be all up for pancakes, I think so.
She would lead you to the breakfast house following her nose. She'd just be
she'd be like, the bacon is this way.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, this was a really fun episode. Happy Galentine's Day to you.
Happy Galentine's Day.
And to everyone, to
Hug
all
your
our Filmi
friends.
ladies and Jans, and also happy Valentine's Day as well. Happy all the days to you guys. And then thank you for watching Filmi Ladies. Don't forget to like, to share, and subscribe, and tell us what your Galentine's Day plans are. Who would you go and have pancakes with, as Beth said? Or tell us what your favorite movies are about female friendships. And we will see you next week again. And thank you for tuning in.
Bye. Bye.